Thrilled to have, we're live. Thrilled to have Jock McNeill here from Pure Home River. Jock and I got a chance to connect a few weeks back, just on the topic of acquisitions, on the topic of what it's like to acquire. And this is pretty fresh after the Pure Home River acquisition. So it was timely in terms of just what it's like to be in that M&A space. I love M&A. It's one of my favorite things in this whole business. And I've had a chance to be through it a bunch of times in my life. And it can reveal a lot about what's going on in your business, both on the buyer side and the seller side. And so why that's important, hell yes. Obviously, everyone's out there building their property management companies. They're acquiring, they're seeking to change in their life, or there's reasons for all this stuff. And it all happens by design, and sometimes rather quickly, and sometimes rather slowly. It all depends on how the whole thing comes together. So thrilled to have Jock on today to chat about that. Now, there is hell yes moments in this side of things. They're both hell yes on both the acquisition side and on the being acquired side, because you both want to try and seek to find a fit and close a gap within each other's organizations, because this is a big sale for both people. And it's important that it's done with the right amount of diligence, the right amount of delicacy and appropriateness for what they're trying to do. So again, this is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX is AI remote maintenance software for property management. We'll help you speed up inspections, speed up maintenance triage, all doing that remotely on site or resident led. And we'll get going right away here. Jock, thrilled to have this conversation today. Just share, when you get kind of tee things up, a bit about your background. How did you end up in this role? How did you get started in this? And ultimately, from a Pure Home River side of things, what's the problem that you're solving for the market, for the company? And we've got latitude there given the role.
All right, great. Well, thank you for having me. I've been really excited about this conversation and been thinking about a lot in the days coming up to this, because I realize I'm in a very unique position in the industry with a lot of information to share. So I got started in real estate and property management in 1999. My best friend from high school and his family owned a Century 21 franchise here in Santa Rosa, California, where I'm located. And they had a small property management portfolio, and he was wanting to take that and grow it. And so I went to work for him as a property manager. Great opportunity, great place to start, did everything in the business. And then about 5 years later, after growing that company a little bit, myself and one of the other employees bought that company. We became business owners in 2004. For the next 15 years, my business partner and I took that company to about 1,100 doors under management, which was a mix of single family, small multifamily, and some larger multifamily too. Nothing over 150 units, but that was really a reflection of what the rental market is in our area. And then after about 15 years, my business partner and I split. We realized that we had different wishes for ourselves in the company. So we had an amicable split. We ended up splitting the company in half. And then shortly thereafter, I got a call from a guy that I had met named Mike Catalano. And Mike Catalano is one of our co-founders at Pure. And we had gotten to know each other really well through a mutual friend of ours named Alex Osenenko. And he and a guy named Jordan Moyla had started this conference called PM Grow. And so we were called upon to speak at PM Grow on acquisitions, because we were both doing acquisitions in our respective markets. So I got to know Mike really well. We hung out a lot. We got to know each other. And he said, "Hey, I've got this idea, and I've got someone I'm working with that I want you to meet. Would you come down to Los Gatos and sit down with us and just kind of share some ideas and talk about the opportunity?" And that's about 2 hours for me. Now, I always welcome the opportunity for an interesting meeting like that. I'm a take the meeting kind of guy. So I drove down, I met with Mike and a guy named Joe Polverari. And Joe Polverari is not from property management, although he can say he's got 5 years under his belt now. But he was one of the OG guys in fintech. And so he came at property management with a very different perspective and a vision of what the possibilities were, and also saw the parallels to the fintech industry, 10 or 15 years prior. So sat down with them, kind of went through, discussing the opportunity. We pitched some ideas to each other. And then a few months later, Mike calls me and says, okay, we're going. This is like October 2020. He says, we're going. Are you interested? And that was my hell yes moment. Um,
Yeah.
and so I started the process of sharing some information about my company with Mike and Joe, and we were very aligned on a lot of things, and I ultimately became Pure's first acquisition. So
Huh.
started as a seller. Well, take that back. I
Well, you
actually,
buy it.
as a buyer, yeah, I actually built my company up with my partner, doing 11 smaller acquisitions in my market. So
Oh, wow.
anything from a real estate agent who had 30, 40 doors that they were managing to
Yeah.
300 door opportunities. So I'd done 11 small acquisitions, which quite frankly creates a very unique set of skills that you don't find.
Yeah.
Someone who understands how to run a property management business, but also understands how to make a deal on
Yeah.
uh, on buying a business. So I first acquisition at Pure ended up in the VP of acquisitions role, and then we had built these relationships. I mean, I've spent my whole career at the intersection of real estate and relationships. I mean, whether it's brokerage or property management, it's always around connecting people with opportunities.
Mhm.
And Mike and I had this circle of friends, of really good operators that we had met through industry events. These are the great conversations that happen in hallways and bars and after hours,
Mhm.
and you know we called on the people that we knew that we liked and trusted, and we knew that would be want to be part of this. So the first six or so acquisitions were really pretty people that were pretty close to us.
Yeah.
And some of those included people who became part of our corporate development team, which is the acquisition side of things.
Yeah.
And we just went out and started working our sphere of influence, and continuing to add people to the team. And it's I got to say, it's the most fun I've had professionally.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, like, a couple things in my experience is that, like, exiting is exciting, right?
Hmm.
No matter what you talk about. We were selling our first company. We ended up having a chat with a guy who had sold a couple companies before that, and he said, "Look, you can't forget that the dessert tray only comes around once during your dining once a dinner, right? And just don't forget about that. And then once you learn about what an exit means, you start understanding how to build a business towards an exit. And
Hmm.
and I've been, like, good and bad at that at the same time along my lifetime. But, like, ultimately, building a business that's worth buying is actually an easier business to run than one that's
Oh,
not.
that is 100% true. The things
You
that
know,
you have to do to make something interesting to me as a buyer are the same things that make something that's long-term sustainable, not going to burn you
yeah,
out, you know, make you money, that kind of thing. So yeah, you're right there.
it's interesting. And so when you take a look at, like, your evolution, like your first role, created the acquisition where you and your partner bought it, and then you guys divested each other, right? And you split it up, and then you went and along the way you bought 11 companies along the way, honing that muscle around acquisition and seeking opportunity and understanding. Like, there's a company called Constellation Software, and
Yep.
they just do acquisitions all the time, right? And they look for the 3Ds, like death, divorce, and disease. It's kind of a morbid way of looking at it, but that's kind of how they begin to filter on opportunities. Now, when you guys get into your hell yes moment, when you were acquired by Pure, and then ultimately, I mean, the transactions that are looking out in the landscape right now, and there's a lot of people that have been, I think, that have been forecasting a significant amount of transactions happening this year for a
Mhm.
couple reasons. And they've been actually. I'll let you speak first. Like, why do you think that we're heading into an M&A curve here?
Oh, I think we've been on it for 5 years.
Oh yeah,
I think it's actually flattened a little bit, but I think it's gonna start picking up again. I think that, there's a few things happening in the background. First of all, you've got our industry headwinds, right? I mean,
mhm,
complexity around, regulation and, hiring good people, and you've got an increasingly demanding, resident base, and increasingly demanding owner base. And
yeah,
it's a hard business, right? So burnout's real in our business.
yeah,
And that's I would add, disinterest to your D's. Uh,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they get to this certain point where they're like, that's it. This is too hard. And I've got other ways that I can make money, or I've done well enough for myself that the juice isn't worth the squeeze here anymore. So we get to see that a lot. And then, we aren't seeing multi-generational businesses that often. It used to be that, your family had a business, and these are mostly like mom and pop businesses, right? Your family
Yeah.
had a business, the kids grew up in the business, filing things or running errands for the business.
Yeah.
So they're the heir apparent, right? I
Yeah.
don't see that happening. I can't tell you the number of times someone's called me and said, well, I thought my son was going to take it, or I thought my daughter was going to take it, and they're not really interested. They want to, do art or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. And then also, I think that people are recognizing that tech is creating a big gap between
Yeah.
companies
Yeah.
and industry, right? And you can't get past talking about how technology has affected this industry. And there are a lot of people who aren't in this business anymore, and they just don't realize it yet.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are, say that one more time.
There's a lot of people who aren't in this business anymore. They just don't realize it yet.
Okay. Let's take a breath. So what's that? So explain that a little bit. I love it.
Well,
I want to make sure I don't interpret it wrong.
okay. So I think about a company that I bought for Pure about 4 years ago. And the owner of the company was between 70 and 80 years old. They had run
Yeah.
that business for 30 years. And they had not been able to understand how to implement technology,
Yeah.
right? So, and they were the solopreneur, right? So they
Yeah.
they didn't have a team of people to do it for them, and they were at an intersection where they said, well, either I need to do these hard things that I'm
Yeah.
not comfortable with, or I need to exit,
Yeah.
right? And so there's people that are going to see that crossroads pretty soon,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you can't catch up to the people that are in this industry that are doing things well, like you and your company and like Pure.
Yeah.
You're going to fall way behind. Now I personally think there's always going to be room for the solo operator who does things manually and pushes
Yeah.
paper and all that kind
Brute,
of
brute,
stuff.
brute force.
Yeah, but I also think that there's going to be more of us who are and using technology to enable people and relationships, and we can move faster, we can pivot faster, we can do more with less resources, and yeah, we're just going to pull ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look at like Pure's background, right? And I had a chance to have Dee Dee on
Yeah.
before the new year. We chatted a bunch about just like the technology background that Pure brings to the conversation that makes it unique. And it's kind of funny. And I was listening to, I'm a huge fan of Matthew Whitaker and Gray Scott, what's Gray's last name? Gray's podcast right now. I've learned a ton through Evernest,
Mhm.
and they were talking about it's a people business. And I paused for a second there, and I'm starting to wonder, like, the people business part, is that something that we lean on as a crutch? Because it seems to me like when I think about it and I peel back the onions, it's a financing business. It's a leverage business.
Mhm.
And people can be a lever, but you can have technology as a lever too. And so like when people think about like how they run their businesses or the choice they have to make in order to optimize it, make it better, make it easier, they often think about the people part first because we're told so many times that it's a people business. But ultimately, it feels like it's a leverage business, and we've just been using people all along the way. Like when you look at businesses to acquire, how do you kind of start to figure out this is a messy bunch of wires, or this is going to be a great fit?
As one of our co-founders referred to something messy, he called it a bowl of spaghetti.
A bowl of spaghetti,
Bowl of
yeah,
spaghetti,
cold
yeah.
bowl of spaghetti, right? You try and pull a
Yeah.
noodle off and it breaks.
And so we look at businesses and their people very, very closely.
Mhm.
So when I collect information on a company, and we can talk about that process, but before
Yeah.
we write any kind of an offer or talk value or anything like that, I want to really understand more about the business. So finances are easy; that's data, right? But understanding how people are involved in the business, who owns relationships with clients, all that kind of stuff. I want to get in and figure out who are the key employees? What happens if our structure of doing things is different than theirs, and we end up having to change that and not work with as many people as they have?
Yeah.
So that becomes a really important piece. And it's also there have been times where we've said, listen, this isn't a work for us. There's too much risk on the people side.
Yeah.
And then there's been other times where it's like, it's a hell yes, because they are running things very similar to us. And the number of units per full-time employee is a big KPI in our industry. And I agree with you. I think it's about leverage, but I also think, the more and more we get away from people having conversations with residents and owners, it might limit some businesses' growth, because I think we need to meet our clients where they are. And I don't think all of them are ready to talk to an AI agent all the time.
Well, I mean, if you look at consumer products, right, they've decided that people get to decide. Like the supplier doesn't get a vote, really. The customer gets all the votes. And so they've chosen the omni approach. Like if you want to buy a plane ticket, there's probably 10 different ways to buy one.
Yeah.
They want to make sure they get your business. They don't want, they build the channels out to make it available to you. And so to your point, not everyone wants to talk to buy an AI agent, but not everyone wants to talk to people either. So it's like, because that's, what's the trade-off here? And I heard that word over and over again from a friend of mine, Chris Wiersma. We were talking about sales, and he's like, ultimately sales is about trade-offs, but so is supply. It's all about the trade-off. Like if we're gonna give a channel of AI agents, that's, okay, it's not gonna be personal, but you might be able to do it 24/7. And if you want to talk to a person, well, that's gonna become the 8 and 5 Eastern time, and that's gonna solve that problem. But like people get to choose. And what's interesting is that like convenience does ultimately win a lot of battles when it comes down to the consumer's choice.
It sure does. It sure does. And I think you're right. I think a diverse approach to our diverse client base is really important. I mean, putting all your eggs in one basket there is going to be really risky for any business. And like I said, there's always going to be room for that solo operator that wants to talk to everybody on the phone and not text, not email, and drive all over the place to properties and, do handshakes and that kind of thing. But there's also, a big space for improvement in the way things are being done right now.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of what Pure is known for, or, Pure HRG is known for, is that like how you guys have become optimized for that number of units per FTE, begins to lead the way. Like when you go look at the business, how do you begin to identify that? Like, what's your first sniff? Maybe let's talk about that. Let's talk about the acquisition process. So what does it look like if I'm running a property management? How do you begin to filter on prospects?
That's a great question. So a lot of times it starts with a phone call or an email inquiry. We get a lot of inbound because we're well known for acquisitions at this point. And I pick up the phone or schedule a meeting and actually talk to people and try and hear them out first. I'm not selling solutions till I understand the problem, right? And we are not always the right solution. And Dan Sullivan, strategic coach.
I just finished my last session last Wednesday.
Okay, so I was part of a strategic coach for a long time when I owned my business, and you get takeaways from that. And one was the R factor question. You remember that?
Yes, I love it.
So the R factor question is, I'll paraphrase it. Let's say we're having this discussion, 3 years down the road from today, and we're to look back at these last 3 years and look at what will have had happen for you personally and professionally for you to call it a success, right? So I like to ask a version of that question to figure out their why and get them to talking. And a lot of times it leads to talking about, all the pain, right? So we can't solve every problem. I realize that we're not a good fit for everybody, but we're a good fit for a lot. And so once I understand where they're coming from, then I lead into the actual process, right? And that process is it's us collecting some information. So of course, we start everything after that first conversation. There's a mutual NDA just to make sure that they know when they're sharing stuff with me that it stays with me in Pure Home River, right? And then we collect P&L information. We collect historical unit count. We're looking at trends, right?
Mhm.
We collect information on their people. We want to know who does what, how much they get paid, and you know who's licensed, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
we kind of figure out what we're working with because we do like acqui-hires. If
Yeah.
someone's a good fit and we can bring them over after the acquisition, we'll do that. That's an easy path for us, and it's
Yeah.
they've got to be the right person, of course.
Sure.
The other things that we look at are portfolio diversity. Okay,
Okay.
so some property management companies are built solely on single family homes, and
Mhm.
that's great. But in markets like where I am in Northern California, the way that the rental housing stock was built out over the last 100 years was single family and small multifamily, and then
Yeah.
infill
Garden style.
projects. So my portfolio reflected that, right? It was quite a bit. But I also want to know, do you have any clients that make up a significant amount of your book of business, right? Because that is risk for us. So if we're buying a portfolio and you've got a client that represents 20% of your book of business,
Mhm.
and we
I
pay
see.
full
Yeah.
price for that and they leave, then we've got an issue. So it's there's a certain point of that client diversity piece where it gets to be too weighted towards one or a handful of clients that will say, that's not a good fit for us. But we want it to be very diverse. We love those portfolios where you've got, you know, 300 clients that all own 2 homes each,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and revenue concentration is a funny thing that everyone's trying to balance, right? Because like biggest check exercise with Dan Sullivan, right? We talk through like how can you increase, what do you imagine your biggest check to be? And then how can you activate that and get towards that? And often the answer is through my existing customer base,
Yep.
which drives revenue concentration, which can actually make you difficult to buy. It's not a straight answer, but
You got to
I you got to balance it, right?
Yeah, you mentioned revenue. So that's the other thing that we're looking at is, where is revenue coming from? And, obviously everyone's got a base management fee and maybe some leasing fee structure, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
have they implemented any ancillary revenue streams that
Mhm.
that are a match for what we do? We don't give any weight to sales brokerage because that's oftentimes inconsistent and kind of transient. That's tied to the licensee that's doing the sale. So, and we don't actually do brokerage, so we're not going to buy that piece of the business. And then when we look at maintenance revenue, we're looking at, um, is it maintenance markup, which is something that we get for overseeing a project or administrating, the project, or is it someone swinging a hammer? If it's someone swinging a hammer, that's really not our business, and we typically don't put a lot of weight into that too. But most of the time,
W-2, so W-2 1099. Is that kind of like how you look at it?
what's that?
Like W-2 1099 kind of like split?
Well,
Or-
usually they'll have like an in-house handyman, right? And that
Yeah.
handyman will go out and change smoke detectors and do minor stuff that at a very reasonable rate compared to what you would have to employ a general contractor with. That's the kind of maintenance businesses they usually have. But I've seen people with full-scale construction companies.
Yeah.
But normally what they're doing is they're setting these up as separate entities to create a
Yep.
barrier between the
Billing.
two businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People are pretty smart. The You mentioned W-2 and 1099. Now, there's some businesses in property management that set their org structure up similar to a real estate brokerage, where you've got the brokerage and then you've got 1099 independent contractors selling real
Mhm.
estate. Well, there's some businesses that set it up where they have 1099 property managers.
Oh,
We don't,
really? Okay.
yeah, we don't buy those because
Interesting.
a lot of times, those independent contractors are compensated at a level that's much different than what we would pay a W-2 employee, although,
Yep.
typically without benefits. And unfortunately, sometimes they think that those are their clients rather than the brokers.
Right.
So it gets kind of
Right.
complicated. So we stay away from those. W-2, we want to know that org structure is going to fit pretty well with what we're doing.
Mhm.
We utilize a pod structure where you've got a property
Mhm.
manager, an assistant property manager, maintenance coordinator, and a field service support person.
Mhm.
And then if someone's got a similar structure to that, that is a green flag, and we
Right.
know that we can make it fit pretty well. So
Interesting. So then you look at the gaps that you're trying to, so just to kind of play it back what I've heard so far is that you've got gaps that you're looking to close, but those gaps have to be closed within a certain fit to the way that you guys operate, because you've done this enough times to know that integration can be a major headache, and you lose value on the acquisition if the integration goes wrong. And so what you're seeking to solve for is that how can we close this gap in terms of market or density, and then or business. And that probably has, like, I don't know, do you ever, like, are you looking to fill out a piece of the puzzle when you look at a region, like a regional PM, or is it we're looking to double down on an area, or is it depending? It depends.
It depends. Our strategy has evolved over time because, we were starting from scratch. So it was all about, great people, great businesses, and new markets, right?
Yeah.
Well, now we're in 35 states, 80 offices. There's a lot of foundation to build on there. So our goal this year, and it may shift when opportunities come up, our goal this year is to do roll-ups in markets where we already have great teams in place and add to them, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. It's the difference between an integration migraine and an integration dull headache, right? So So that's our strategy. The types of companies that we look for are anywhere from a 50-unit portfolio up to the top end is wide open. We will do platform acquisitions.
And do you find that without disclosing too much, like, does the multiple kind of follow a bit of it? So this is what I've seen. The multiple can find a bit of a J curve. Like, it can be really, like, at the 50-unit level, it's going to be fairly call it 1x or whatever the X is, but then the multiple starts to flatten out at a certain level. And then as you get to a certain size, 500,000, it starts to the multiples start to increase. Like, is that something that you see as well?
Yeah, it does. I mean, a smaller portfolio is not worth that much. And it's always worth less than the seller thinks it is.
Yeah, totally.
I won't say that's a steep curve of increased value, but it does increase a little bit. Because we're focusing on roll-ups, I think most of the deals that we do in the next 24 months are probably going to be right in line with the size of deals that we've done, 350 to 450 units. And that works well for us.
And then what's the multiple generally based on? Is it based on top line revenue, or is it based on EBITDA?
We're basing it on EBITDA. Yeah. Now, I will say on these tiny deals, there's no EBITDA. Those people don't own a business. They own a job.
They own a job.
Yeah. And so we will look at those sometimes on multiples of management fees. It really just depends on the size of the deal.
So it's kind of interesting for people listening. Like, you need to build your business to be viable. Like, architect your business to be viable, because, like, you're looking at an EBITDA perspective. If you're stuffing a whole bunch of personal expenses in there, or like dinners out, or whatever you want to, I've seen everything from private planes and things like that. Like, if all that's being stuffed, what's that?
A Maserati lease was my favorite.
Maserati, yeah, right. I mean, those sort of things start to all like distract from the actual acquisition possibility, and it increases the expense for the due diligence pieces, and then makes it a whole lot slower to transact, and makes it unattractive for the multiple, which everyone's trying to get to, or some people are trying to get to. Like, I guess it comes down to, like, if you're architecting your business to be acquired versus if you're architecting your business to be a lifestyle business. But sometimes life happens and you don't realize that you're actually in the position to sell it, but it's not architected to sell.
Yeah. We have a solution. We have a solution for that. So one of the beautiful things about this industry, Guillermo, is that you can run a business almost any way and be successful, right? There's 40,000 property management companies across the US. There's hundreds of tech platforms. There's hundreds of different sets of regulations. So you end up in the millions or even billions of possible variations of a property, right? We realize that. And I will say that, I've looked under the hoods of 250-ish, maybe 300 property management companies in my role here. No two are the same when it comes to their P&L. They call income streams different things. They call revenue classifications different things. So when we get in there, there's a lot of Q&A. So when I receive financials from you as a seller, I'm going to look through them, and based on in my experience, I'm able to pick out a lot of things really quickly because I've seen a lot of these, but I'm going to ask questions. The other thing that's really important, if you are running a lifestyle business, which, I mean, this is what these entities are about, and this is what this
Yeah.
business is about. This is why we own businesses, right?
Right.
So if you're running, I don't care if you're running your country club through there. I don't care if you've got your kid on payroll, but they don't work. That's
Yeah.
not my business, but be able to call it out.
Right.
So, those are the things like, the P&L that you send to your CPA might be a different version of what you send
Right.
me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm not encouraging any kind of like, fraud or
No, but
anything.
there's normalization. You need to normalize,
Yeah, it's an adjusted EBITDA at some
Yeah.
point when we take out things that we know are not going to come with us at close. And to your point, when people are intentionally building something to sell, honestly, that stuff is much less important than staffing,
Mhm.
because it is by far the largest overhead for your company.
The staffing piece.
Staffing, yeah. So if you can find a way to be efficient with your staffing, and I'm not saying you have to fully max it out and burn out everybody and keep them running hard all the time, but
Mhm.
you don't need 15 people to run 200 doors. Um,
Right.
so there's tighten it up a little bit is my advice. The other thing to consider that really makes a property management company valuable is when you've built the company and plugged in people that fit roles rather than building a company and roles around the people you have,
Sure.
because sometimes you end up with something that's putting the fun and dysfunctional, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
it's not a very transferable business because it's all dependent on one or two people who you've had the institutional knowledge. You've kept them on the team for so long. Oh, they're so good. I'm just gonna build this job around them, right?
Yeah. The hero business is tough to acquire because it
Hmm.
comes with a lot of risk and volatility to it. And that hero may decide they just don't want to work with the new company because they had it pretty good when they were
Yeah,
working the previous, situation. And then all of a sudden that risk exposure gets lands on the acquirer.
yeah.
And
Well,
you can't lock up everybody.
we recognize that as a problem that we could solve early on
Mhm.
in establishing the culture at Pure. We're I think between 900 and 1,000 employees now with the Home River, and this was a merger of equals too. By the way, it's not an
Yep.
acquisition; it's a merger of equals. And you know, keeping culture at scale is really hard.
Yeah.
I had culture with my 10-person company, which was
Yeah.
very you know homespun, but creating culture from an intentional perspective makes a company really attractive. And we're the Inc. best places to work. Inc. 5,000. We've really earned our stars on that, and as a result, a lot of the times we find that when we go to onboard an employee post acquisition, it's a much better situation for them. So we make it really attractive. Their job might change a little bit, their responsibilities, even the title might change, but we're going to give them great benefits. We're going to give them great leadership. Their job's going to be well defined. There's a lot of things that make that transition really easy,
Mhm.
but you can't get past the the key employee that doesn't want to move. That's a challenge and a bit of a risk for us. So.
Yeah. How do you find that? Like, do you ever find that where it's maybe at one of the partners in the firm that doesn't want to move?
Oh, like if we're buying a business and the sellers are coming over, yeah, we've had that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where one of the sellers doesn't want to go, minority shareholder is not interested in the move, that kind of thing.
yeah, and honestly, there's we've evolved as a company now where in the first couple of years we were looking for people to fill seats,
Mhm.
and it's not really the case anymore unless they have a really specific set of skills and we have a match on our side for them.
Yeah.
The exception to that would be if we're entering a new market and we need someone to run that. But it's really hard to bring an entrepreneur
Sure.
into a W-2 role, reporting to somebody when you've been a boss for 20 years. I mean, I did it. I was the boss for 20 years, and
Yeah.
we were talking about strategic coach. One of the great things that came out of that was my understanding of teamwork.
Yeah.
And, kind of, my understanding of myself as a teammate. I
Yeah.
really love being a good teammate. Like that gives me a lot of energy. I don't have to be in charge in order to feel great about what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so if you find the right personality in a partner like that, then yeah, that could be a good fit for them. But most of the time they are all aligned about moving on.
Yeah. No,
And
that's why they're having the conversation about the acquisition, because they want to get you the assets. Now, okay, so let's kind of look at the life cycle things for you guys. Do you guys do
yeah.
expression of interest, letter of intent, and then asset purchase or share purchase? How does it work?
Yeah. So LOI is,
Or
that's where you
NDA first, NDA.
NDA, LOI is basically, rough price and terms based
Yeah.
on what's been presented to us. And then once we've got a signed LOI, then we're drafting the purchase agreement, and at the
Mhm.
same time, we're running diligence.
Yeah.
We do them both at the same time for the speed, and
Yeah.
we like to get to the end of diligence, have a signed PA, and be able to close quickly.
Cool. And
Yeah.
then so if someone's looking to sell, what's this timeline look like? Is it 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 3 months?
A lot of that depends on the question I ask at the beginning.
Right.
Right. So for
Fair.
us, we like to move pretty quickly.
Yeah.
My record during our first 3 years was sign an LOI on Monday, got it closed on Friday. And I don't wish to repeat that. That was very difficult, but it was because the seller had their stuff together that it was possible.
It's clean.
Yeah, typically, we'd like to go from LOI to close in 60 days, 90 days.
Yeah.
We can sometimes, move close dates around to meet a seller's needs. And sometimes we need to, because, you've got integrations happening,
Yeah.
and, that's a limited resource. That's a team of people that are, putting these acquisitions into the pure Home River way of doing
Right.
things. And, I can't, although we've done it, I don't want to close, 8 deals in the last 3 weeks of a quarter.
Right. Right.
I don't make friends that way.
No, because you've got to, because every acquisition has its own little, it's just an integration. It takes a bit of work. I mean, it's just life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
then
we're very good at it. We've done it so many times now.
Yeah.
We've got this team, the pit crew, that basically they're actually helping with diligence. So they're getting in to understand about this portfolio we're bringing in before we even
Mhm.
close. So they're
Mhm.
setting up the integration path. They've got the checklist, in place. It's pretty well orchestrated, and I've been really impressed with this team of people that we work with. One of the things I'll say about this group is probably the smartest group of people that I've ever worked with at Pure.
Sure.
Just really brilliant people with a lot of great ideas, and pair that with good culture,
Mhm.
and it's been really incredible.
I mean, it's interesting to talk to, like from the having been an acquirer and then being acquired and then going through the cycle so many times. There's got to be things that you see that are like red flags. Like, so what's a red flag that automatically you go, okay, no, this isn't for us?
That's a good question. Let's see. Well, the obvious ones are, are they in trouble with the law, right?
Okay.
And we've only had 2 deals that fell out post LOI, and
Mhm.
they were both related to that. One, someone had a DRE audit, the Department of Real Estate audit, that they didn't
Sure.
disclose. And, we're not going to buy something in the middle of a DRE audit. The other had a significant trust fund shortage that couldn't be reconciled. So, those kind of things, those are big red flags. We also talk about the people. We don't look at 1099 employees or
Right.
1099 team members because it's just too risky. We've done it, and that's how we learned. So, we learned something from every deal. How involved is the seller in the day-to-day of the business, right?
Interesting.
That's a big part. So, like, I talked about it earlier, that person doesn't own a business, they own a job.
Yeah.
Um, is the person involved in the day-to-day? Are they talking tenants and toilets? Are they talking to owners?
Yeah.
And they want to step away, right? It's likely that a lot of the people that do business with them because of who they are and their chemistry and the relationship, right? Rather than the process and the reputation of the business and that kind of stuff. It's more about that individual person. So
Yeah.
that can be a red flag for us. It's not something that we can't get past, but we need to build a deal around it when it comes to
Right.
like retention language and clawback and that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure the books are tight. So the trust account has to be tied up 3 ways. So that's called a reconciliation. Most states require that every 30 days. So if you can't make your balances for your owners and your residents' money match up, that's a problem. We've identified that during diligence as an issue before, and then we just either figure out how to get the seller to fund it prior to close, or we drop out. So we have some revenue metrics. So we've got revenue per door type metrics company wide that we try and keep. If they don't meet our minimum, we filter
Mhm.
those out. But that's something that happens really early in the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the quality of the units is really important. I mean, we don't want to manage C and D units if we don't have to. I mean, there's something about having a C unit where the owner wants to make it an A or a B. That's different than just having a C unit because the owner
Yeah.
likes investing in C units.
Yeah. Well, now when you look at ownership, like do you see them? Do you just filter out the assets? Like if they own some of the properties, is that part of the deal, or are those carved out of the deals and you guys take the PM business? Like how does that work?
We look at those on a case by case basis.
Mhm.
It's very common that a property
It's
management
smart.
company, yeah, it's like, you want them to own units because they're in the business, right?
Yeah.
But if it makes up a significant portion of the business, we'll usually exclude it. Like we're going to take that revenue and set it aside.
Yeah.
And then if they say, hey, I want to exit the business and I don't want to manage my properties, then maybe we'll work out a relationship with them where we'll just give them a great friends and family deal on management fees and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, managing for property managers is tough.
Yeah, I bet because they have their
Yeah.
own little. Well, cooking for chefs is tough too, right?
Yeah.
So
They can do it better than anybody else, but they don't want to do it.
yeah, yeah, because tenants, toilets, and trash is hard.
Yep.
That's when you take a look at like the filtering through, and you're kind of you've got your people, you've kind of like you've gone through the process, you got the cycle. How have you found like? And you talk about how you guys have been repeatable, like, and you got inbound coming in. So you're kind of like it feels like, and this is kind of like maybe a bit of a stretch, but it feels like there's a product market fit that you guys are either at or marching towards, where you have inbound. People are doing the hard work of getting things set up and getting it all done. They're building good businesses. You have inbound. You're able to filter on the inbound based on your criteria for acquisition. And then, so the problem of the market of seeking to find an exit, you're able to absorb that over and over again. And there's an abundance of people. And I think what's interesting with this business is that for every acquisition, there's a renewal. I shouldn't use that word properly. There's kind of like an undershoots of when people exit, they kind of get back in the business again, or people leave property management firms, they get back in the business again. So there's always a regrowth. That's a better word.
It's like the mafia. You can't, you can't leave. Yeah.
You can't leave. And so do you find that, have you ever acquired somebody twice?
No, but I know a few people that that were bought by a company other than us that when their time was up on their non-compete, they started a new company and got back into it in a different market.
In a different market.
Yeah, we've created a lot of consultants in this industry through buying their companies, and there's some really great people in that side of the business.
Mhm.
Haven't bought anybody twice, but we haven't been at it. We've only been at it five plus years.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe this. I mean, maybe this is the year because it feels like that's the life cycle, right?
yeah,
Things are around 5 years. They probably caught up. It's not unusual. I mean, we see it a lot in other asset industries where this is people do, like they're flippers, right? I was looking up just out of curiosity. I was skiing on the weekend and I was looking up the owners of the ski hill and what do they do, right? Because that's always an interesting thing to figure out. And these guys had been like flipping all along. And sometimes they've been acquired twice by the same company, just because they're really good at that part that the big company is not good at, of getting it all set up and started.
It's interesting. It would take a very rare individual to want to do this twice. I mean, I would question them, their sanity. one of the things I do see though is it's pretty common for property management company owners to have other businesses, right? There's always
Right.
a side hustle.
Well, the
So
maintenance for sure.
yeah, I mean myself, when I sold to Pure, I also owned part of a franchise brokerage business. I also
Right.
owned a commercial property management business. I've since
Mhm.
divested all of them. Most property management company owners will either do real estate sales, that's a job slash business, or they'll have a construction business or something complementary to what we do. So yeah, I don't know if I'd really worry about somebody if they said, yeah, that hurt, let's do that again.
Well, I mean, people do it, right? They figure out how to do it
Yeah,
and they make it working. And I mean, yeah, it's I don't know, it happens. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if you guys come across that.
yeah.
Um, so when you take a look at these people, and it's interesting about this whole, like, especially what Pure is known for, like being technology and process driven. Do you find that when you do some of these acquisitions, you uncover new ways of doing things that you adopt that across all of Pure?
That's a great question. So again, this is a strategy that's evolved over time, but
Mhm,
at the beginning, the conversation was, hey, we're building a collection of best practices.
mhm,
Okay? We would look at a business and say, this is interesting how they're doing this. Can we scale this across all of our markets?
mhm.
And yes, that does happen. Now, I will say it happens less and less as time has gone on. Um, but it's a great way to take the learning curve out, is put together all the best ways of doing things from all the best operators. I talked about the first acquisitions we did. They were people who were close to us.
Yeah.
We knew they were known entities, right? But they were also people who were very well respected in the industry, and we knew that we were buying good portfolios. So when you have that, you build the foundation. The hard work's done early on, and then we can take a business that isn't really as well developed, I guess, as
Mhm.
those first businesses, and put it on top of that without a lot of stress.
So then when you take a look at that way of doing things, like, do you often see, like, when you do their first filter of like units per for FTEs or revenue per door, do you see something that's like out of out of what your tolerance would normally be, and it kind of forces you to go, wait a second, how are they doing this way? You kind of double click on it.
Yeah, yeah. Usually it's they have way too many people for the number of units, and
Mhm. Sure.
and the gap between what we would do and what they're doing is just so big that
Yeah.
it would be a lot of people shifted. And so sometimes we'll stray away from those. I haven't seen it the other end of the
The other,
spectrum, where it's like they're running 500 units with one person, an AI agent, and a VA in Mexico.
yeah.
Like, I haven't seen that yet.
Well, Brad Hargraves, I think he's having it this week, maybe even tomorrow. He's talking about what an unmanned property management company would look like
I saw that on LinkedIn. Yeah.
from an AI sort of things. So that could be an interesting discussion, just even consider what it might be possible. Because, like, it feels though a lot of people are stuck in the middle. Like, they're
Mhm.
stuck like with they'd rather hire, they'd rather vend. It's easier to do. But ultimately, if the metric that I'm going to be levered on, or if my multiples be based on revenue per door, which is kind of like, basic stuff, but like units per FTE is really a productivity number. And I can
Mhm.
hide that, to your point, I can hide that with 1099s where they're not an FTE, but it's like it's still an FTE by definition. And, like, things like that can begin to muddy the middle. But ultimately, when you're looking at businesses to acquire, you're seeking to see an element of leverage in that organization that isn't just people driven.
Yeah.
Or I guess the other way would be about it is that, hey, I know if we acquire this, we're going to be able to get all these units, and we're going to be able to make a significant difference in the way that it's operated, right? I can pay at a lower. I mean, I guess it could be considered to be opportunistic, right? If you've got somebody who's got a very high FTE per unit basis, you can go in there and go, well, I know we can cut half.
Right. And we do look at that. I mean, we're looking at headcount, but the bottom line is we still have to deliver a service well,
Right.
right? So if you don't have a good playbook, you can take people away and add technology. And what's that saying? I'm going to paraphrase this. You can add technology, and if you don't have a good playbook, you just do poorly in front of more people. Something to
Yeah.
that effect.
Yeah.
Uh, so you can take the people out, but you got to make sure that you can deliver the service. And uh, that is really where a lot of people struggle is, they decide to take someone out, but then no one returns phone calls.
Right. What's interesting here is that to take away is that like, to think of what people listen for is that like when you're looking to buy, like you're willing to pay for a good business, not just like you're not and integrate that. Like has the lesson been? I'll frame it as a question. Has the lesson been that it's better to buy a good business and integrate that than buy a bad business and make it work
and fix it? Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely better to buy a good business. And mamas love their babies. Everyone's proud of the business they've built,
Sure.
whether it's performing well or not. They're proud of it because they put a lot of hard work into it.
Yeah.
One of the conversations that I have early on with people is I try to be realistic about expectations on what's going to happen if they sell, not just to us, but to anybody. And there's always this fantasy that like, I've built this amazing business. It's turnkey. You can just pick it up and run with it. But no one's going to buy a business and not change it.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to have a little bit of detachment from that during the sales process. So if anything, even if they don't end up buying from me, they're going to come away with a better set of expectations around what the process is. And, I said early on, I'm a take the meeting kind of guy. I have a lot of conversations with people that are not good prospects for us or that, aren't really ready to sell right now. And I love them because it helps me keep the saw sharp for one.
Sure.
And then also I'm a firm believer in, you get what you give. And so, we have a lot of referral sources who send us, leads, consultants, or, people in the industry, and such is thinking about selling. Oh, you need to talk to Jock. Right. And then I have that conversation and they might say, well, I'm not doing this for 5 years. I got a kid in college. I'm like, well, great. Well, here's what you need to do now.
Yeah, for sure. Convert those 1099s to W-2s. Start like working on your units per FTE. Working your, for sure, right? And then you just keep them in pipe. That's a sales cycle.
It is.
Right?
It is.
And you might even put them on a drip where it's like, here's our best practices and here's our peer newsletter, all these things to keep them in funnel.
Yeah. Yeah. For that deal that I closed in 5 days, the other end of the spectrum is one that took 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
you can't, this isn't a high urgency sale usually.
Right.
It's usually, one of those things where someone's calling because they are getting to the point where they want to do something.
Yeah.
And they want to be ready. It's very rare that someone's buying something because they're, they need to get out of it tomorrow. And so a lot of times it's up to me to ask the right questions and then also recognize the opportunities where we need to move on something. And then once you move on something, get it done because time kills deals.
Yeah. Do you ever find where there's someone who's been through maybe a preliminary conversation with somebody else and they're like, oh no, I'm gonna go talk to Pierre, and they start shopping around?
Yeah.
How do you feel that?
That's changed. There was a time when 21, 22, 23, when, acquisition frenzy was going on and there was, us and, we were going up against Home River and there's some other competitors out there now. Home River's, with us. So that's not an issue, but generally speaking, it came down to price and terms, right? And we were always pretty close. It was pretty rare that we got beat out on price. But it came down to fit a lot of the time or them seeing the opportunity. So, if you look at the seller's hierarchy of needs, it's price and terms first, right? A clean exit for them. But the next thing they think about is their people. And their people is broken down into two parts. It's their employees and their clients, right?
Yeah.
They want continuity for their employees. They want good service for their clients. So they have to, really pick a good partner. And we've got an edge there being built by industry insiders. I mean, there's a lot of folks on our exec team that are not from the industry originally, and that perspective has proven to be very valuable for the company. But they also want people that know what property management is about, that understand the needs of residents and the property owners, because we've got to deliver that service at the end. Deliver. And so, a lot of these folks are are in the communities where they built their businesses, the last thing they want to do is sell a business and then run into a former client and hear how poorly something went post acquisition.
Sure. Right. Those are like kind of your classic entrepreneur archetype, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they understand that there's going to be that their reputation is all they've got. I mean, again, like this is the Dan Sullivan thing is that, like you are who you are when you're an entrepreneur, and that means that's lifelong lasting. And
Yep.
like ultimately, as entrepreneurs, we're only, our source of energy comes from it's inside us, and so consequently, and he talks about our confidence is something that is the most important thing in an entrepreneur, because once that becomes damaged, then they become, there's this whole raft of things that can happen to an entrepreneur once they start losing their confidence.
Yeah,
and we're mindful, we're exceptionally attuned to that, because we understand that like the things that feed confidence can be things that are out of our control. So how can we make sure that we're minding that in a way that we're not risking the things that give us confidence, because that can ultimately erode where we're going. It's really psychological, and selling a company can be tough too, right? From a psychological perspective, it's not easy.
Incredibly tough. I mean, I said it before, mamas love their babies. People are emotionally invested in their companies, and rightfully so, because it's an extension of you.
Yeah. It's been representation of your personality, yourself, and everything.
Yeah.
You take a look back at the things that you learned over the years. I'm gonna wrap this up. What's a bit of advice you'd give yourself before you bought that first property management company that you know now?
I probably would have bought more.
Oh yeah.
I would have bought more. Yeah. Because there was times where I had restraints, whether it was capital or time.
Yeah.
And they were not really restraints. I could have found more capital. I could have changed my schedule and made things work. I would have done more acquisitions, and I would have done more organic growth. And because when I turned around and sold, I had a great profitable business. I had a great career, a great lifestyle. But you look back on all those what ifs, and I don't have regrets around anything like that. But if I had the opportunity to do it over again, I would. I probably would have asked more questions during my original acquisitions. I don't think that I knew as much about diligence back then, and I didn't have any bad experiences. I got really lucky, but knowing what I know now back then would have been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the playbook, right?
Yeah.
The experience playbook. Yeah, there's a long list of things that we wish we knew younger, but that's super helpful though. I mean, asking more questions and understanding that maybe if I kind of play it back to you, having a fact-based understanding of your risk profile versus kind of like an opinion-based or an emotional-based of your risk profile, because you could have bought more if you just thought about it differently. And I think there's a lot to that I've experienced in my life. Certainly knowing what I know now and what's possible with capital funds and all those things, it's all possible. Who should we have on next?
Oh boy, I have two ideas on this, and it depends on which direction you want your conversations to go. So you and I both have a mutual connection to Drew Myers with Geek Estate Mastermind, and I like following his stuff because he talks about a lot about the whole real estate industry and about the future of what we're doing. And there's a lot of ideas in there that I think would be really interesting to people that you speak with. So I would talk to Drew, and then he's going to connect you to the spider web of people, right?
Oh yeah, he's great. I was part of his gym for a whole year.
Yeah, same here. That's our connection. So the other person, I used to own a part of a real estate franchise called Next Home, and I don't own it anymore. But the co-CEO of Next Home is a guy named Keith Robinson, and he and the other co-CEO, James Dwiggins, host a podcast called Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered. And Keith is one of the funniest guys I've ever met, one of the most authentic and genuine people that you'll come across in the business, but he knows sales. And so he speaks to primarily realtors, but about authentic sales, about getting past whatever blocks you have in your own head. And I think he'd be a good conversation if you can get him.
Right on. We'll reach out to all three. Cool. We got time out here. Appreciate your time today. Look, thanks everyone for listening. catching us on the podcast, like, subscribe. That makes it easier to find. If you're catching us on LinkedIn Live later on, just add any comments there and we'll be able to jump on. Both of us will get notifications. This has been super interesting, Jock. Thank you so much for your time. Hope it was helpful for everybody to understand when you think about the context of the exit when it comes to property management. I certainly learned a lot and even had a chance to replay a bit of my experience, but put a frame around it rather than just have a floating memory. And that's always very powerful from a reflection perspective. Thank you so much for your time today, Jock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Take care. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And take care. Cheers. Bye. We're good.